I love how God reveals himself through his creation. I often think of it as like the fingerprint of God. In the same way that if I had my fingerprint on this glass, someone later could come by, and if they were to examine it, if they found my fingerprint, they could tell I've been there, I've touched this cup. In the same way, God reveals himself through his fingerprint that he's placed on creation. And what I mean when I say that is that God's creation reveals part of God's nature. In 1 John chapter 1 verse 5 it says, God is light and in him is no darkness. Well, what does that mean, God is light? What I love about that is the more that I have studied the properties of light, the more that I can get in touch with the nature of God. If I asked you to take a minute and to think about what is the brightest source of light that you know of in your life on a daily basis? Probably thought of the sun. That's what comes to my mind. You know, the sun is nothing but a star, but it's our star. It's our sun. In fact, it's the brightest light in the heavens that we see. It's so bright that if any one of us goes out and looks at that sun, stares at it without any sunglasses or any protection, we can blind ourselves. I've stared at the sun just briefly to look up and glance at it, and when I do, all you see are spots because the brightness of that star is so bright that it blinds you, it hurts your eyes. What is it that we can learn from that? Just think about the glory of God. If that's the glory, the radiant power of the sun that we see, what do you think God is like? It's got to be even more immense. And I believe that's why God, when he turned to Moses and Moses said, God, I want to see your glory. God said, you can't, you'll die. Because God's glory is brighter, more radiant than the sun. God created the sun. So if God created the sun, it can't in any way be as radiant and glorious as God himself. Because God created it. It's from God. But God's glory, so immense and powerful that we can't even approach his throne. That's why he says to Moses he'd die. In the same way, we can learn a lot about God by the nature of light and the nature of darkness. We know that there's a spiritual enemy because God reveals it to us through his word. He calls him the adversary, the opposer. You know, there's a lot of different names for Satan or the devil that God uses, but he equates him to darkness. If you think of evil, we always think in terms of darkness. In the same way that we can learn from God by looking at the properties of the sun, what is the darkest object that you could think of? Well, science tells us there's things that are called black holes. Something that is so dark that no light can escape from. Something that draws draws objects into it. Whereas the sun is always giving, it's always radiating out. Things are flowing out from the sun. On the other extreme is a dark hole, which is always pulling things into it. It gives nothing. In fact, it basically sucks things into it. One, the sun, is the source of life as we know it. Photosynthesis and all the properties of life would cease to exist without that sun. On the other extreme, the black hole, which is complete destructiveness, always pulling in, always about itself. In fact, I saw recently on one of the science channels that anything that would be pulled within the grasp of the black hole would not just be sucked in. It would not be like the earth just got pulled into this black hole, but the earth would fragment even to the point where molecules and all of these elements would be broken down to their smallest atomic stage as they're sucked into the vacuum of the black hole. Just look at what we can learn about God and his enemy by looking at nature. When I think about light, I think about warmth. When we think about darkness, it's cold. Light gives life. Dark gives death. Remember, when you're dead, you're in the realm of the darkness. Light always illuminates. Darkness always hides. With light, there's freshness. With darkness, there's always stagnancy. With light, it's always about flowing out. Everything flows out. With darkness, there's nothing. It's just there's nothing that comes from that. I also think about properties of light: humility, grace, mercy, forgiveness. But the properties of darkness are unforgiveness, unmerciful, bitterness, hardness. So my point is, we learn a lot about God from His Word. He says He is light. But then we can take that to the next level and learn about God from the evidence, the fingerprint of God that He has placed on the physical world around us. And as we do, I think we can learn a lot more about ourselves, that if I am living in self, if I'm a vacuum, if it's all about me, then I'm in darkness. But if I'm about giving, about not being self-centered, if I'm about serving others, then I'm living in the light. Because after all, we're supposed to be imitators of God, so we need to understand what God is like.